For God so loved the world that he gave. There's not a particular Christmas that I remember, but I do know that I've always been with my family, and I'm glad my mom and dad are here tonight because they've taught me what it means to give. They've given throughout the years at no particular time, but throughout all the years at Christmas themselves. And they've given me love. You all have given me love because they live 500 miles away. And Christmas means a lot because at every Christmas, whenever we've sat, whether we've all been together or apart, whether we've sat together in front of the stereo or whether we've been in the den, we've always read the Christmas story from Matthew or Luke. Whether we've been in Michigan or whether we've been in Tennessee or Florida or whether we've been in Mobile, Alabama, we've always showed love to each other, and that's what Christmas means to me.
When Dr. Lombard called me a couple days ago and asked me to share a Christmas memory, we laughed a little bit and said, well, I don't think I have a Christmas memory. But as soon as I hung up the phone, just a ton of memories just started coming back and flooding my mind with the different things that's happened. And I suppose one that I wanted to share tonight is not necessarily a tradition, but I guess it kind of is a tradition. But of course, most of my memories had two things in common: food, of course, and family. And the one I can remember the most is we would always get together with all my mom's sisters and brothers. And that may not mean very much to you, but she had 9 sisters and brothers. And so sometime during the week of Christmas, we would go to my grandmother's house, which was my mom's mother, and all the brothers and sisters would get together. And of course, they all had children of their own. And so there were many, many cousins that we got together with. And my grandparents were now living in a home that just had 2 bedrooms in it. So it was a very small home, and we had about 40 or 50 people that would pile in. Everybody would bring the food, the pies, the turkeys, the ham, the cookies, everything. We'd all gorge ourselves with the food. We'd listen to our uncles laugh. They were all comedians. They thought they were, at least. And they would tell their stories about the farm, growing up on the farm. Well, when I was a little lad, this is what we did for Christmas. And, we had to pass the food. They put their arms out, said, here, the big table had 20 people sitting around it, how they served their food, and these stories are indelibly etched in my mind. And then we'd give our presents to our grandparents. That was the main purpose of the evening, to be there to give our presents to my grandmother and my grandfather. And my grandfather would always get sausage and cheeses. I'm not sure why, because he had no teeth, but still has no teeth, but he loved sausage and cheeses, so that's what we'd always get him. And then, of course, my grandmother was a little bit more difficult to buy for, but she would always smile and say thank you, and she would love the present, although I'm not sure if she really liked the presents, but she would say she would. But then came the time where all huddled around in the living room, just packed in, you couldn't even move because we were all so tight in there, we would start singing the carols. And it was just neat to watch my uncles and my aunts as they sang the carols, and tears would come to their eyes as they really would think about what Christmas was all about, because the majority of that whole group of people were all Christians and knew what it was to be a Christian and to know Jesus as their personal Savior. And my most favorite was at the end, we would always sing Silent Night, and that was probably just the time that was most precious to me, to sit there and listen to my family singing Silent Night.
One of my favorite Christmas memories is that of a white Christmas. In 1985, while we were living in Colorado, and after many years of singing White Christmas and Winter Wonderland and all of those snow-related songs, the Lord gave me a white Christmas. And for someone who's born and bred in the South, this was a special time. And this is one of my favorite Christmas memories.
I remember the Christmas music. We were little fellows that always had a good time at Christmas. In our house, I can remember singing Christmas carols with my family and being so embarrassed standing on the front porches, trying to keep from being awkward, and it never worked. But we had a big time with Santa Claus at our house. Santa Claus would come every year, regardless of how bad we were. And we had, Mother would just work us into a frenzy by the time Christmas was there. And on Christmas morning, she would wake us up before dark, before the light came up, and she would say, Santa Claus has been here, and he's left you stuff, and there's just a room full of presents. And we would go just wild, and try to put our slippers on and pull them on as fast as we could, and we'd make us stand there and not go in until she had gone on and put on the Christmas music. And so we went into our den, and there was just presents, and boy, it was just such a beautiful thing. The Christmas tree and the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and they would sing choirs of angels, sing in exultation, and boy, it was just beautiful and wonderful. Years later, I enjoyed singing Christmas carols. I still do. We would go caroling. I've been caroling with the young people, with the 8th graders, and with the college department. We've gone and sung with the young married folks at South Baldwin, South Mobile County, and we've just had a wonderful time singing Christmas carols. The music has always been wonderful. And Dolphin Way's music has always been more than magnificent. It's always been great and just spectacular, and certainly this year was no exception. To hear the Messiah is wonderful. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. But to sing it is another thing. It's a different experience altogether to sing those words and have those words come out of your mouth. And it's another thing to sing it when the Lord is real in your heart. And I can remember clearly singing that Messiah for the first time when Christ was alive in my heart. Doug Scott was a music director, and we sang the Messiah, and I sat there and just filled up so with the emotion of that music. And I remember when we sang the Hallelujah chorus, where the music says, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And I just filled up. I couldn't see my music. I thought I saw Doug, but I was just overcome with that music. So I would say to you, church family, that this is music in my life has been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I wish you the merriest of Christmases.
I know that many of you, when you see me walk up here, you were so afraid that I was going to sit at the piano. But I'm not, because they didn't ask. How many of you have been to a piano recital, and as a parent, it was a real endurance? You just about died before it was over. Dr. Lombard has asked me to share with you this story. You know, I remember one of my first piano recitals, I had memorized 8 pages. And it seemed that I sat down, and before I knew it, I was up and taking my bow. And as I walked off the stage, I looked at my piano teacher, and she was... And I looked at my mom and dad, and they were... And so after the recital, I asked what was wrong, and my teacher said, well, out of your 8 pages, you played the first 4 bars and the last 4 bars. But I got through it. Here's an account of one that I think will probably bring maybe a memory to you at one of your recitals. Miss Livingston was a soft-voiced, charming lady in her 50s who started many of the local children in the piano lessons. And once a year, she held a concert in the Methodist Hall for her pupils to show their paces. Oh, they ranged from 6 years of age to teenagers, and the room was packed with their proud parents. Jimmy was 9 and at the time had been practicing without much enthusiasm for the big day. Now, everybody knows everyone in a small town. And as the place filled up and the chairs scraped into position, there was much nodding and smiling as people recognized each other. I found myself on the outside of the aisle with Helen on my right, and just across a few feet of space, I saw Jeff Ward, old Willie Richardson's cowman, sitting very upright with his hands on his knees. He was dressed in his Sunday best. His red, strong-boned face shone with intensive scrubbing, and his normally wayward thatch of hair was plastered down with Brill cream. "Hello, Jeff," I said. "One of your youngsters performing today?" He turned and he grinned. "Now then, Mr. Harriet, it's our Margaret. Now, she's been coming on right well with her piano lessons, and I just hope she does herself good this afternoon." "Of course she will, Jeff. Miss Livingston is an excellent teacher. She'll do just fine." "Of course." He nodded and he turned to the front as the concert commenced. The first few performers who mounted the platform were very small boys in shorts and socks, or tiny girls in frilly little dresses, and their feet dangled far above the pedals as they started at the keyboard. I noticed, however, that as the children grew bigger and the pieces became more difficult, a certain tension began to build up in the hall. The errors weren't so funny, and when little Jenny Newcomb, the fruitier's daughter, halted a few times, then she bowed her head as though she was about to cry. The silence in the room was absolute and charged with anxiety. I could feel it myself. In fact, my nails were digging into my palms and my teeth were tightly clenched. When Jenny successfully restarted and I relaxed with all the others, the recirculation burst into my face. Well, we were probably more than parents. We were just a band of brothers and sisters who were suffering through each of our own children's pieces. When little Margaret Ward climbed the few steps to the platform, her father stiffened. From the corner of my eyes, I could see Jeff's big work-roughened fingers clutching tightly at his knees. Margaret went on very nicely till she came to a rather complicated chord which jarred on the company with harsh dissonance. She knew she had got all the notes wrong, and she tried again, and again, and again. Each time she jerked her head with effort. "No, C and E, dear," murmured Miss Livingston, and Margaret crashed her fingers down once more. Again wrong. "My Lord, she's not going to make it," I breathed to myself. I suddenly felt my pulse was racing and every muscle in my body was rigid. I glanced around at Jeff, her dad. It was impossible for anybody with his complexion to turn pale, but his face was stone white. He seemed to sense that my glaze was on him because he turned with his tortured eyes toward me and gave me a ghastly semblance of a smile. Just beyond his wife, she was leaning forward, and her mouth was hung slightly open, and her lips trembled. As Margaret fought for the right notes, a total silence settled on the packed hall. It seemed an eternity before the little girl got it right and galloped away over the rest of their piece. And though everybody had relaxed in their seats and applauded with relief as much as approval, I had the feeling that the episode had taken a toll on all of us. I certainly didn't feel so good, and I watched in half trance as a succession of children after Margaret did their thing without incident. Then it was my son's turn. There was no doubt that most of the performers and parents were suffering from nerves, but this couldn't apply to my son. He almost whistled as he trotted up the steps, and there was a hint of a swagger in his walk as he went to the piano. This, he clearly thought, was just going to be a cinch. In marked contrast, I went into sort of a rigor as I saw him appear. My palms broke out in an instant sweat, and I found I was breathing with great difficulty. I told myself that this was utterly ridiculous. I had to calm down, but it was no good. That was just the way I felt. Jimmy's piece was called The Miller's Dance, a title which is burned in my brain till the day I die. It was a rollicking little melody, which of course I knew down to the very last note. And Jimmy started off in a great style, throwing his hands about and tossing his head like Arthur Rubinstein in full flow. Around the middle of the Miller's Dance, there is a pause in the quick tempo where the music goes from a brisk ta-rum-tum tilly-illy-pam-pam to a lingering ta-rum, 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 before starting off again at a top speed. It is a clever little ploy of the composer, and it gave a touch of variety to the whole thing. Jimmy dashed up to the point with flailing arms till he slowed down at the familiar ta-rum, ta-rum, ta-rum. I waited for him to take off again, but nothing happened. He stopped and looked down at his fingers for a few seconds, and then he played the slow bit again, ta-rum, 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 and he halted once more. My heart gave a great thud. Come on, Jimmy. You know the next part. I heard you play it 1,000 times. My voiceless plea was born of desperation, but Jimmy didn't seem troubled at all. He looked down with mild puzzlement. He rubbed his chin a few times. Miss Livingston's gentle voice came over the quivering silence. Perhaps you'd better start at the beginning, Jimmy. Okay. My son's tone was perky as he plunged confidently into the melody again, and I closed my eyes as he approached that fateful bar. Ta-rum-rum, tilly-illy, pam-pam, ta-rum, 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 and then nothing. This time he pursed his lips, put his hands on his knees, and bent closely over the keyboard as though the strips of ivory were trying to tell him something. He showed no sign of panic and only a faint curiosity. In the almost hush of the room, I was sure that the hammering of my heart could be heard by everyone around me. I could feel Helen's leg next to me trembling, and I knew that we could not take much more of this. Miss Livingston's voice was soft, and she said, "Jimmy dear, shall we try it one more time from the beginning?" Yeah, right. Anyway, he went again like a hurricane, all fire and fury. It was unbelievable that there could ever be a flaw with such virtuosity. The whole room was in agony. By now, the other parents had come to know the Miller's Dance as well as we had. Jimmy came up with breakneck speed to that familiar ta-rum, illy, pam-pam, and then ta-rum, 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 and silence. Helen's knees were definitely knocking now, and I stole an anxious glance at her face. She was pale, but she didn't look like she was quite ready to faint. As Jimmy sat motionless except for a thoughtful finger against the woodwork of the piano, I felt I was going to choke. I glared around me desperately, and I saw Jeff Ward across the aisle. But he was in a bad way. His face had gone all blotchy again, and it was my son. His jaw muscles stood out as taut ridges, and a light sheen of perspiration covered his forehead. For my son, something had to break soon, and once more it was Miss Livingston's voice which cut the terrible atmosphere. "All right, Jimmy, dear," she said. Perhaps you'd better go and sit down now." My son rose from the stool and marched across the platform. He descended the steps and rejoined his fellow pupils in the first few rows. I slumped back in my seat. Oh, well, that's that. What indignity we must face. The poor little boy, he had really blown it. And though he didn't seem troubled, I was sure that he must feel a sense of shame at being unable to get through his piece. A wave of misery enveloped me, and though many of the other parents turned and directed sickly smiles of sympathy and friendship and Helen at me, it really didn't help much. I hardly heard the rest of the concert, which was a pity because the bigger boys and girls got to perform the musical standard Rose to remarkable heights. At the end, Miss Livingston came to the front of the platform. "Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the kind reception you have given my pupils. I do hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have." There was more clapping, and as the chair started to push back, I rose to my feet, still feeling pretty sick. "Shall we go, Helen?" I said, and my wife nodded back at me. Her face was just a doleful mask. But Miss Livingston wasn't finished yet. "Just one more thing, ladies and gentlemen," she raised a hand. "There is a young man here who I know can do much better. I wouldn't be happy going home now without giving him one more opportunity. Jimmy," she beckoned towards the second row, "Jimmy, I wonder if you would like to have one more try." As Helen and I exchanged horrified glances, there was immediate response from the front row. Our son's voice rang out, chirpy and confident. "Yeah, I'll have a go at it." I couldn't believe it. The martyrdom was surely not about to start all over again. Oh, it's true. Everybody was sitting down again, and a small familiar figure, my son, was mounting the steps. From a great distance, I heard Miss Livingston again. Jimmy will play the Miller's Dance." She didn't have to tell us. We all knew exactly what Jimmy was about to play. As though in the middle of a bad dream, I resumed my seat. A few seconds earlier, I had been conscious only of a great weariness, but now I was gripped with a tension that I had not known all afternoon. As Jimmy poised his hands over the keys, a vibrant sense of strain lapped around the silent room. The little lad started off as he always did, as though he hadn't a care in the world, and I began a series of long, shuddering breaths designed to carry me past the moment that was fast approaching. Because I knew he would stop again, and I knew just as surely that when he did, I would fall flat on the floor. I didn't dare look around at anybody. In fact, when he reached the crucial bars, I closed my eyes tightly, but I could still hear the music so clearly. Tarum-tum, tilly-illy, pom-pom, tarum-tum, tarum-tum, tilly-tilly, pom-pom. Jimmy was on his way again. I feel relieved, too. He raced through the second half of the piece, but I kept my eyes closed as the relief flooded through me. I opened them only when he came to the finale, which I knew so well. Jimmy was making a real meal of it. His head down, his fingers thumping, and at the last crashing chord, he held up one hand in a flourish, a foot above the keyboard, before letting it fall by his side in the true manner of a concert pianist. I doubt if the Methodist Hall had ever heard a noise like the great cheer that followed. The place erupted in a storm of clapping and shouting, and Jimmy was not the man to ignore. All of the other children had walked impassively from the stage at the end of their efforts, but not my son. To my astonishment, he strode from the stool to the front of the platform, placed one arm across his abdomen and the other behind his back. He extended one foot, and he bowed to the audience in one direction. And then he reversed his arms, pushed the other foot out, and he bowed to the audience in the other direction. The cheering changed to great roars of laughter, which continued as he descended the steps, smiling. Everybody was still giggling as we made our way out. In the doorway, we bumped into Miss Mullion, who ran the little school which our son attended, and she was dabbing her eyes. "Oh, dear, dear," she said breathlessly. "You can always depend on Jimmy. He provides such great relief." I drove back to the house very slowly. I was still in a weak condition, and I felt it dangerous to exceed the speed. The color had now returned to Helen's face, but there were lines of exhaustion around her mouth and eyes as she stared through the windshield. Jimmy, in the back, was lying full length along the seat, kicking his legs up in the air, whistling some of the tunes which had been played that afternoon. "Mom, Dad," he explained in a cheerful manner which was so typical of him, "I like music." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "That's good, son. So do we." Suddenly he rolled off the back seat and he thrust his head between us. "Do you know why I like music so much?" "No, son. Tell us why." "I've just found out," he cried delightfully. "It's because it's so soothing to everybody."
this is more fun to do, but I want you to know what's this Dr. Lombard thing? Usually when I get called Dr. Lombard, I know they go to Mobile College because they're the only ones that call me that. And all these people, it's been Dr. Lombard this, and it's just Becky, and I'm the one with the funny shoes. And everybody says, why does she wear those shoes all the time? But it's what I have to do to play that. But I want to introduce everyone to you tonight. This is Amy Hanks, and she's a junior at Baker High School. And I think, Amy, you've taken piano about 10 years, haven't you? You should see her mama down here grinning. She's just grinning. She's so proud. And this is Shannon Simmons. And Shannon is a freshman at Mobile College, and she gets to call me Dr. Lombard. And I wish she was my piano student, but she's not. She studies with Becky Fox, and she gives class to this show tonight. I'm telling you, she's great. And Bill and Jeanette have to play together. They can't play apart. They don't. And Jeanette teaches piano at Cottage Hill, and Bill works for the Corps of Engineers, and they've been in Dauphin Way for years and years and years. And they met playing in the band at Murphy High School. Bill played the drums, and Jeanette played the bells, and he told me they've been making beautiful music ever since. And at the center here, at the top is Debbie Young, and she's one of my very best friends. And for many years, for a while, she was pianist here. For many years, she was music secretary, and our music ministry owes her a great debt of gratitude. And next to her is Glenda Evans, and Glenda's biggest claim to fame is that she's married to Mike, our sound man. And I'm so glad to have Glenda because she plays the organ. So now I can go somewhere on Sunday because we haven't had anybody to play. But she's a fine, fine pianist and organist and has served us both in churches. And this is Chris. And I have to tell you, I've been a pianist you want to clap? I wouldn't let him wear his ponytail tonight because I told him my mother would be here.
I was only joking.
But I have to tell you this. I've been a pianist or organist in a Baptist church for 31 years. And I have never played with a pianist like Chris Springer. I'm telling you, we are a team, and if he ever goes, I go too. He's wonderful. What I can't do, he can do, and he just pretends that I can do things he can't do, but that's not true. And I've never worked with anyone that I have such a kindred spirit with, who knows no ownership of a bench, and just loves the Lord and wants what's best for the church. And we are so blessed of God to have him at Dauphin Way. At the back piano is my daughter Melinda. My baby got to play. It's terrible to have a mother who's a college professor. Oh, it's terrible. But she's real excited to get to play tonight, and she's a sophomore at Shaw High School. Next to her is Nancy Krushwitz, and Nancy plays in our orchestra. She teaches at Palmer Pillins Middle School. She's a math teacher, and she plays keyboard in our orchestra. And I really must say that in the 2 years that I have been here, I have never asked Nancy or never heard anyone else ask Nancy to do anything that she said no. She always does it. She wants no glory, and she gets put in the background, and I think sometimes we abuse her a little bit, but she's always got a smile and a willing spirit, and I think she's probably the greatest unsung hero in our music ministry. at the top right here is Karen Travis, and she's probably the newest member of our church that's playing, and she's my newest piano student, and she came to her first lesson and pulled out a sonata and played it, and I said, I think you should play in keyboards at Christmas. And she and her husband Philip moved here from Denver, and he is a doctor in our city, and she's very active in the community and is in our handbell choir and is a great friend. And next to her is Bryan Sterner. And Bryan, you've heard Bryan time and time again, and Chris and I are blessed to have Bryan to take our place when we're gone, because everybody likes to hear him play more than they like to hear us play. So we are so thankful to have him and his willing spirit, and always there for us when we need him, and he is greatly blessed with a wonderful talent. The next piece we're going to play, we played last year, and everybody says, you're going to do Sleigh Ride again, you're going to do Sleigh Ride again. It's everyone's favorite. So for you, this is Sleigh Ride.
I love that choreography, don't you? They do great. On the back of your program are the carols that you have the opportunity to sing with all these wonderful instruments. As we stand together and we sing the Christmas carols, Magnificent Night. Let's stand as we sing. remain standing.